Materials were laid on your chairs about the sponsors and the change in the new Virginia photo ID law. Please make sure you are election ready before the close of registration on October 14th. Fairfax County will be using new election equipment this fall. We have registration and absentee request forms available, and candidates have campaign material. Now, the all-important format for us today. All candidates that will appear on the ballot were invited to participate. Candidates that could not appear were allowed to send a substitute to read a statement in their place. Candidate substitutes will read the candidate's statement but not answer questions for them, but that's not relevant for us today. Candidates will deliver, let's hear this one carefully now, 3-minute timed introductory remarks. And we have wonderful timekeepers up here who are nice people until you go overtime. And then they may change their personalities to keep things in order here. You will get a 30-second, 15-second, and stop sign alerts to help you stay on track. The question and answer starts after all the candidates have completed their introductions. Response time to Q&A is 2 minutes. We will rotate the order for answering the questions. Candidates do not need to answer every question or use the full 2 minutes. Volunteers will provide index cards and collect them. If asking an oral question, please wait for the microphone so the question and candidate response can be captured on tape. All questions should be brief and specific and contain only one question at a time. We will want to cover a variety of topics, and I will be adhering to this rule very carefully up here. We will have time at the end to allow one-on-one time with the candidates and for volunteers to clean the venue. At 1 hour into the meet and greet, we'll take a brief pause to allow Jim to switch video recordings, and you'll give me the signal when that is. Candidates have agreed to the rules and will be introduced based on the order that they appear on the ballot. By coin toss, the Republican Party candidates appear on the ballot first this year. However, candidate Barbara Comstock, who was invited and was given the same procedures as everybody else, is not appearing and has chosen not to send a representative. So we will lead off with Democratic Party candidate John Foust.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters, AARP, and the Coalition of Asian Pacific Americans of Virginia for doing this. We're really, really pleased to have this opportunity to come out and talk to you about the campaign. I'm running for Congress to help grow our economy and create opportunities so more families can have the opportunity to live the American dream the way I and my family have. You know, unfortunately, Congress is broken. It's holding our country back. It's too partisan, we know that, and it's not getting the job done, and something has to change. You know, I've served on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors for 7 years, and we do things differently in Fairfax County. I think we do them right. We work in a nonpartisan way across the aisle. We consider ourselves reasonable, common sense problem solvers, and that's what's missing in Washington today. I believe my track record demonstrates that I can work with everyone to solve problems. When I ran for re-election last time, there were 28 precincts in my district, and I was the first Democrat ever re-elected in the district, and I carried all 28 of those precincts with 60+% of the vote. I think that shows you that I'm a problem solver, and I work across the aisle. So on the Board of Supervisors, I've been Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee. We've made it through 7 very difficult years, and cut tens of millions of dollars in operating costs in order to make our county more efficient. I've been chairman of the board's audit committee, where again we look for inefficiencies and ways to save money, and have had a great deal of success. And I've served as chairman of the Economic Advisory Commission, working for 6 or plus years to bring jobs to Northern Virginia, to ensure that we have a strong economy so that we can have the quality of life and the services that we want here. When I go to Congress, my priorities will be to get past the partisanship, work across the aisle so we can deal with our fiscal challenges and make Washington work again. We need a functioning Congress to address and solve our fiscal challenges, but also to create jobs and opportunity. We need to invest in job creators like education, infrastructure, and research and development. We need to improve education at all levels, including expanding early childhood education and placing more emphasis on creative thinking and STEM education and making college more affordable. And we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform so that we can take advantage of everyone's talents and make it easier for highly educated immigrants to come to our country and stay in our country and contribute to our prosperity. So I'm looking forward to this afternoon, and I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Libertarian Party candidate Bill Redpath.
Pardon me. Thank you very much. I'm Bill Redpath. I'm the Libertarian candidate for U.S. House of Representatives in the 10th Congressional District in Virginia this year. First of all, a little about me. I've been a Virginia resident for 29 years. I have a bachelor's degree from Indiana University and an MBA from the University of Chicago. As a civilian, I am a business appraiser. I'm a certified public accountant licensed in Virginia. I'm also a chartered financial analyst, and I have business valuation designations from the American Society of Appraisers and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. This is my 6th run for public office. Among the times in the past I've been a candidate, in 2001 I was the Libertarian candidate for governor, in 2008 for U.S. Senate, and 4 years ago in 2010 I was the Libertarian candidate for the same office, U.S. House 10th District. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for including me in this debate, as well as Dianne Blais and Brad Eickholt. Unfortunately, we were excluded. We've been excluded from past debates. Just last Wednesday, we were excluded from the Loudoun County Chamber of Commerce debate and also the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce debate we were excluded from on September 3rd. That's too bad, particularly that I was excluded, of course, from the debate, because the Libertarian Party is on the move and is growing in this nation. This year we have Rob Sarvis as our candidate for U.S. Senate, and we have 7 candidates, including me, for U.S. House of Representatives. That is a record for the Libertarian Party of Virginia. In 6 of the last 7 U.S. House elections, Libertarian candidates across the nation have earned over 1 million votes for U.S. House. Again, that's 6 of the last 7 U.S. House elections. The last time any other third party did that was in 1912. And also, the Libertarian Party this year may set a record for midterm elections. Never in the history of this nation has a third party ever received nationwide over 1.5 million votes for top-of-the-ticket offices. What does that mean? It means governor if there's a gubernatorial election. If not governor, it means U.S. Senate. Now, there are 5 states plus the District of Columbia this year that don't have a governor election and don't have a U.S. Senate election. So, for instance, it's mayor in the District of Columbia. It's Secretary of State in Indiana. In Washington State, it's U.S. House. So not only does it appear as if we'll top 1.5 million votes nationwide for top of the ticket this year, it actually appears that we'll go over 2 million votes for top of the ticket offices, and that shows how the Libertarian Party and libertarian ideas are advancing in our society. We'll have an opportunity to talk issues during the Q&A, and I'll defer any further comments, substantive comments, until my chance to answer your questions. So thank you very much for attending. I look forward to the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dianne Blais.
I know Brad, but Brad isn't feeling well, and I thought I'd let him go ahead of me if that's okay with you all. Are you sure? Okay. Hi, I'm Dianne Blais of the Independent Green Party. The Greens want a better world with peace and justice now and in the future. Green parties now exist in most countries with democratic systems. There's a green representative at national, regional, and local levels in many countries around the world. Greens were against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and want no further military aggression there or in any part of the world. The first candidate for president of the Green Party of the United States was Ralph Nader in 2000. Jill Stein was a candidate in 2012 and probably will be in 2016. She was at the Climate Change March in New York City last weekend. GP.org has a lot of information about the U.S. Green Party, including the 10 key values in its platform. The U.S. Greens seek to bring a vibrant grassroots democracy to every part of the United States and believe that the U.S. winner-take-all voting system is fundamentally flawed. Greens have 16 specific recommendations to repair the U.S. electoral system. Among them, proportional representation, as called for by Fair Vote, the Center for Voting and Democracy, of which Bill Redpath is treasurer and on the board of directors, instant runoff for single-seat elections, and finally, full public financing of all federal, state, and local elections. We want no corporate donations or bribes, as I call them. I believe these corporate donations are extremely detrimental to our citizens. Personally, I want term limits, and given the current system of electoral districts, I want redistricting without gerrymandering. Greens call for a radical shift in attitude towards support of families, children, the poor, and the disabled, who should receive basic housing, nutritional and educational necessities. We believe that health care is a right, not a privilege, and want single-payer, universal health care and preventive care for all. We want increased public transportation and a reduced prison population. We must create new opportunities for citizens to serve their communities through non-military community service. I have been interested in, active in politics most of my life. I'm running for Congress because I think the United States can do so much better in so many issues. I want to make that happen. I'm honored to be the Independent Green Party candidate for Congress and would be honored to be your representative for Congress. And I'll end by saying the three mottos of the Independent Green Party. They are more candidates, less apathy, more trains, less traffic, fiscally conservative, socially responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dianne. And now Independent Brad Eickholt.
Good afternoon. As Dianne mentioned, I woke up ill this morning, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to stay for the question and answer portion, but I did want to come by and introduce myself and say a few words. And as such, the sponsors and my colleagues have allowed me a couple of extra minutes on my 5 minutes on my opening remarks, so I appreciate that, everybody. I want to thank the AARP and the League of Women Voters for holding this forum today and allowing me to speak to you. For anyone who attended the Monday meet and greet that was in Chantilly, I used my opening remarks to explain why I'm running. So I'm not going to repeat that here today, but I do encourage you to go check out the video on YouTube, or you can find a link to it through our Facebook page, Eickholt for Congress. So I encourage you to go and check that out. Today, I want to use my time to speak about a few issues that I think that Congress needs to work on immediately. And I'm going to lead off by reminding everybody that we actually don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic. The people do not make the laws. They elect the people who make the laws. And it was built that way by the founding fathers because, for one reason, they feared the mob mentality of the people. So and that is not always wrong, which is to say that overwhelming public opinion is not always the reason why we should do something. However, the statistics I give here and the issues that I mention here I don't think fall into that category. So I think these issues are things that we seriously need to get done. The two parties need to come together and get them done. So the first one on my list, which is the most important issue to me, is tax reform. A Pew Research poll in 2013 indicated that 72% of respondents said that we need major changes to our tax policy, or that the whole thing needs to be completely rewritten. I completely agree with that. I think we need to get rid of all the credits and deductions and have a flat tax so that we all know exactly what percentage of our income we're all paying. So I know that I'm paying the same percentage of my income as the millionaire or billionaire, and we take away all the special exemptions for the excuse me, I can't think of the word. Okay, and why doesn't this happen? It's because politicians in Washington use the tax system for two things. One, to try to manipulate the economy, to make it falsely go up whenever there's a downturn in the economy. And we need to take this ability out of their hands because they are woefully bad at doing that. They end up causing unintended consequences that end up causing more harm than good. And they use it to dole out money to the special interest groups that continue to get them reelected. We need to take that away from them as well. Flat tax, take away the credits and deductions. That's my number one issue. Entitlement reform, I believe, is the second issue. And I'll just ask, why doesn't this happen? Because politicians in Washington see it as the third rail of politics, right? You touch it and you die, because they believe that mainly elderly voters will come out railing against them if they decide to change any of these laws. However, that is not borne out by the facts. In fact, an AARP poll was taken of individuals over 50 years of age, and 91% of them said that the two parties need to come together to fix the entitlement programs. 91%. So I don't see where it is that they are going to get elected out of office if they fix these programs so that they will be there for future generations. We need to get it done. We need to get it done now. Entitlements take up 20% at least of our total expenditures in the government. And so if without fixing that, trying to balance the budget is just never going to happen. Finally, I want to talk about immigration reform. And this one is my favorite because in a poll, 53% of people said that they would support a path to citizenship. Okay, 53%. However, when the path to citizenship was actually explained to mean that they would pay a fine and all their back taxes and pass a security check, etc., that number went up to 72%, which means if politicians would just explain what they're doing and why they're doing it, people will get on board. So these are the issues, my three number one issues that we need to work on right now. I appreciate the extra time for everybody. If you have any questions for me, I left some cards in the back. Please email me and I will respond to everyone that I get. And I would just like to say that in November, please, like me, be independent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the candidates. So the first set of questions are going to come from today's event sponsors, and since I'm up here with AARP and we start alphabetically, we'll go first. How would you protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations? Mr. Foust, you're first.
That is my goal, to protect and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. The best way we can do that is to grow our economy. And there are a lot of things we can do to grow our economy that we aren't doing. I think I mentioned in my introduction, we need to start investing in infrastructure and education and research and development, types of things we used to do as a nation, types of things that, that are not happening today. One of the biggest challenges we have is the shrinking size of the workforce compared to the number of people who are eligible for those benefits. So increasing the workforce is the most important thing we can do by increasing jobs. Immigration reform would go a long, long way to helping solve our challenges with Social Security and Medicare. There are so many people in this country who are waiting for the opportunity to become active participants in the economy in a above ground way that are now currently undocumented and unable to get the types of jobs that would help us strengthen Security and Medicare. On the Medicare front, one of the things that I truly want to see us pursue is to allow for discounting of drug prices. The Veterans Administration has it, Medicare does not, we need to work on that. So I think these are the types of issues that we should be looking at. Of course, on Medicare also, we need to be attacking the cost of health care. We need to be finding ways to reduce the cost. These things combined are the way to go. Just reaching out and, taking the Republicans' budget of just slashing and taking away the guarantee, that's the wrong way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Redpath.
Just want to make sure I heard the question correctly. The question was about Social Security.
I'll repeat the question. It is, how would you protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations?
I support the Cato Institute's 6.2% plan for Social Security, and how that would work. It would not change anything for people 55 years of age or older with Social Security. It would give people under the age of 55 the option to either remain in the Social Security system or opt out of the Social Security system. And if they opt out, their 6.2% employee portion of Social Security would be directed to a private investment account, because there's one thing that isn't brought out enough regarding Social Security, and that is that you do not have, nobody has personal property rights in their Social Security benefits. It is decided by Congress. If Congress wants to change Social Security benefits, they can do so. With the private investment accounts, it would be up to the individual. If they wanted to invest in the stock market, they could. If they wanted to invest in money market funds and go more conservative, they could do that as well. But the important thing is they would have personal property rights in their retirement program going forward. This has been a remarkable success in Chile. In Chile, they've had investment accounts, workers. You've had average workers in Chile that have retired as millionaires. When given the opportunity to go out into a new program, the vast majority of Chilean workers have done so. If they can do it in Chile, they can do it in the land of the free. So, and by the way, one point I want to say is the 6.2% employer port tax would continue to be paid and would go into the Social Security system to fund the benefits of current retirees and future retirees who decided to stay within the system. But a part of this is no tax increases. If you remain within the Social Security system, you have access to the benefits that taxes are funding, and there will not be transfers from the general fund into Social Security. And I think this has been found to be actuarially sound when studied by a government agency, and I think that's the best solution for Social Security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Blais, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question is, how would you protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations?
Okay. I'll react to both of my previous candidates' answers. I don't think our economy should constantly be growing and growing. I mean, we want an increase, but our whole capitalistic society is kind of going in the wrong direction, I think, sometimes. And then as for privatizing part of Social Security, I think that's problematic. But basically, there's a lid about when people pay, how much they pay, and it's rather low. And I think that it should be rather constant. So people who make over, what is it, 70,000, 100,000, whatever, that would still pay a percentage rather than that cap. So that would be my solution as to what we should do about it.
And Mr. Eickholt was feeling under the weather, and I think he had to depart for his health. So let's go to the second question, the question from the League. If you were to reform the Affordable Care Act, what specific measures would you include to ensure that all those covered were still guaranteed the comprehensive benefits currently provided? Outpatient services, mental health and substance abuse services, physical and occupational therapy, lab tests, preventative services, care coordination for chronic diseases, full maternity and lactation care, and full pediatric services. On this, Ms. Blais, you are first. Just in time for you to finish sipping there. Here you
go. Okay, I was trying to take all that in. Basically, as single-payer party espouses a single-payer system. So if you need something, you will get it. And and all those variations and different ways to handle it would be not applicable, actually.
Mr. Redpath, do you need me to repeat the question? No. Okay.
I've got a reasonably good grip on it. I will have to respectfully disagree with my Green Party colleague that health care is a right. I don't think health care is a right, and because I differentiate between negative rights and positive rights. Negative rights are rights where nobody has to do something for you. Right to life, right to liberty, right to your property. Nobody has to do anything for you for those rights. On the other hand, positive rights, right to food, right to shelter, right to health care. Somebody has to do something for you in those circumstances to exercise positive rights. Libertarians think negative rights are the true rights. But with respect to health care, I would say this, is that I would repeal the Affordable Care Act. Number one, just because there is health insurance doesn't mean there is health care. There is a difference between the two of them. And what I favor is, first of all, a refundable insurance tax credit that would be refundable income tax credit that would be payable to individuals and families as long as that credit was used to purchase health insurance. I think we ought to greatly deregulate health care. I think that we ought to be able to purchase health insurance across state lines. I think that although many of these issues are state issues, but in Texas, there is a problem in Texas because of the law in Texas has doctors have to be more involved in many healthcare procedures in Texas than in other states. Well, out in the rural areas of Texas, that creates a real problem because various nurses cannot do certain medical procedures that would benefit patients because there's not a doctor there to supervise them. So I think we need to deregulate more, and it's interesting that prices have actually gone down where people pay for their own medical care, LASIK surgery and plastic surgery, things of that nature where people actually see a price tag. Costs have gone down over time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Foust, you need me to repeat the question or do you have it? Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you. You know, the list of benefits that you read, those and many more are examples of why the Affordable Care Act is the right way for this nation to be moving. Clearly, you know, it's such a big piece of legislation, and clearly there's a lot of fixes that are going to be required, and I am looking forward to going to Congress to work on those fixes. Republicans in Washington have taken a repeal approach. You all know that. That would take away those benefits and many, many more, and it would return the ACA, or the health care, to the insurance companies, who, as we all know, decided that our pre-existing conditions precluded us from getting health care, decided that we'd used too much health care or insurance in a year, and they would cut us off. These are and they would raise rates without any accountability. So my opponent, Barbara Comstock, is not here. She's chosen not to participate in these forums. That's her choice. But I will tell you what she said to the Chamber of Commerce, where she does participate in the forums, and that is she wants to see the ACA repealed. That's absolutely the wrong way to go. We can't. We've got a great start. We've got to move forward and fix and improve what we've got, and we cannot turn our health insurance back over to the health insurance companies to let them decide what health care we get. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from our colleagues at Zeta. What is your position regarding changes to the Voting Rights Act? And Mr. Eickholt, you will be, Mr. Redpath, you'll be first. I'm sorry. He's not here.
I was lent a book about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago by a friend that was the book, I don't recall the title, don't recall the author. It was ostensibly a book about the history post-World War II of the Republican Party of Virginia. What it really was a history of politics in Virginia post-World War II. And I will have to tell you that the world has changed remarkably. What members of the General Assembly were saying on publicly in the early 1960s on the issue of race and segregation was truly shocking. Truly shocking. And the world is nothing like it was back 52, 54 years ago, a half century ago. What really bothers me, first of all, I think there should be a right to vote in the U.S. Constitution. But what does it mean when you get to the ballot box and there's almost no choice there? Does anybody know how many, in November 2013, less than a year ago, how many of the 100 single-member district elections for Virginia House of Delegates had only one candidate on the ballot? No, it was 45. It was 45 in 2013. In 2011, it was 63. 63 of the House of Delegates elections out of 100 had only one candidate on the ballot, not one challenger, just one candidate. So I think that there is not a need to restore certain provisions. There was a need 50 years ago, but there's not now for certain provisions of the Voting Rights Act. But what really matters, or what our main problem is an uncompetitive single-member plurality voting system. I agree with Dianne Blais. We need proportional representation for our legislatures. That's what is used in most advanced democracies, and ironically, that's what they have in Iraq, which we fought for.
Thank you. Mr. Foust?
Proportional representation is certainly something we should talk about. There's a lot of things that should be on the table that we talk about, but the reality that we have today is a two-party system in this country, and the further reality is that the Republican Party has been working overtime for the past several years to try to limit our ability to vote. They're trying to take away the right to vote from so many different groups, whether they're minority groups or elderly people. So the fact that the Supreme Court ruled the way it did on the Voting Rights Act, in my opinion, was a travesty. And the only good thing about that decision was that it was decided not on a constitutional basis. In other words, so that Congress can go back in and fix the mess that the Supreme Court, in my opinion, made. And I look forward, when I get to Washington, to not only working on fixing the Voting Rights Act, but to working as aggressively and as hard as I can to protect and restore voting rights throughout the nation for everyone. It's the most important, in my opinion, the most important right we have as citizens of this country is the right to vote. I know not enough of us exercise it every year. That's disappointing, but we should not be taking it away from people. We should be doing everything within our power to expand the ability to go vote. So that's my position. Thank you.
Minute. Thank you. Swapping mics. Okay. This one's on. Okay. Ms. Blais?
I don't know exactly what the Green Party's stance is on the Voting Rights Act, but hopefully things have gotten enough better that it's not as necessary. Well, it isn't as necessary as it used to be, but I hope that there were good reasons that the Supreme Court voted they did, and I wasn't. And so whether to bring it back we'll just have to wait and see. I did want to say about the health care that we definitely are in favor of the Affordable Care Act. It's a step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from the coalition, and the question is, what is your position on DACA, or the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, regarding the children of undocumented parents? Mr. Foust?
Well, I think we have to recognize that in this country we have a system that is as good, if not better, than any other. And a lot of it is based on the fact that we have due process, we have hearings, and we give people a right to make their case. And so I think, you know, we have the right system in place. I think it's working. It's, you know, somewhat difficult at times to implement and somewhat costly. But, you know, the trade-off would be much worse, to take away the types of rights we're talking about and not give people the opportunity to defend their position or to explain why they're here. So I'm in favor of it.
Before I go to Ms. Blais, we're going to go after this question to an audience question, an oral question, so think about who might be ready to do that. Ms. Blais?
Well, the Green Party stipulates that it is in favor of anyone can live wherever they want, whenever they want. But of course, there again is reality. But personally, making children, kind of recognizing citizenship and not the parents, it kind of is splintering to the family, and so we would like to keep all the families close together. So.
And Mr. Redpath.
I'll state my position on immigration, and it's pretty much that of the Libertarian Party, although refer to the Libertarian Party platform on lp.org just to make sure. But my position is, if someone does not have a serious communicable disease and does not have a criminal background and cannot reasonably be deemed a security threat, they ought to be able to immigrate to the United States, get a work visa, and have a reasonable path to citizenship, period. And I think that this applies to children, applies to their parents. Families should not be splintered, and unfortunately, the situation of children coming to the United States has been fueled by violence in Central America that unfortunately has been instigated by the federal war on drugs. And that is a big reason that there's been a preponderance from certain nations where the violence is highest for those young people to come to the United States. So, but with respect to the specific question, I've got to agree with George Will, who says that it's ridiculous to think that these children cannot be assimilated into this nation. And he says basically that they be told you're going to go to school, you're going to work here, and you're going to be an American. And I think that he's spot on that. I think you can't just look at costs right now. And I do think, while I think federal grants to state and local governments are way too high and out of control, rising too much, in this case, I think it would be appropriate for the federal government to step in and provide financial support here. But you have to look at immigrants. You have to look at immigrants over the entirety of their lives, not just what might be spent on them now, but the productive citizens that they will be in the future. And that has to be taken into account in evaluating the economics of immigration.
Thank you very much. Okay, so is there a question from the audience that wishes to be offered? Okay, now with the caveat, it's got to be brief, and the question's got to show up pretty early in the question. So, yes, sir.
I won't break any of your rules.
Okay,
I love everybody that come in peace. My name is Stephen Hill, Senior Organizer for Elections Issues with Bread for the World. And my question is to all the candidates. With nearly 50 million Americans struggling with food insecurity issues, if elected, what will you do legislatively and governmentally to make ending hunger a priority during your first term?
Mr. Redpath.
I really don't see that as being a role for the federal government to play. I think that's for private organizations and state and local governments. I think that makes the most sense. It's certainly what's called for under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Not that I certainly want zero people to be hungry, but we have spent so much, I can't summon the figures right now, but I know over the past 50 years, since the war on poverty was declared, there have been I don't know how many billions spent on the war on poverty. There are so many different programs in the federal government right now. The system is fractured. I would say this much, that if the federal government is going to be involved in such a thing, I would just say that the only program there should be a negative income tax from the federal government. And otherwise it is an issue. One of the big problems and one of the reasons that even when the economy is pretty good, we're running a $500 billion a year budget deficit, which is going to stay about where it is and then is projected by the Congressional Budget Office to start going up again about the year 2018, is that we are looking to the federal government too often to solve our problems in this nation, and I just don't think that that is an appropriate issue for the federal government. Should be private entities and state and local governments to address that issue. It is an important issue, but I think federal government is not where we should begin addressing that.
Thank you. Ms. Blais?
Well, I'm totally disagreeing with that, because to rely upon churches to fill in the need for hunger is inadequate, in my opinion. So many people get missed when you do that. We need to have a simplified tax system, and we need to have a system where people have a minimum standard. If we decide to get rid of homelessness, we could do it. We have to have a minimum standard in this country, and ideally, the Green Party wants to a minimum standard throughout the world. There's just, this stress level is just too high for so many people, and they're just trying to just survive. We need a livable wage.
Thank you. And Mr. Foust?
I think you've identified one of the most serious challenges facing us in our world, or our country today. You know, the difference between the income inequality, the fact that there are in this land of fairly tremendous resources, so many people who are living in almost abject poverty, and kids being hungry in the United States of America is not acceptable. I think, you know, there are different things we can do. One takes a little longer. And again, I keep coming back. We've got to invest in job creators. We've got to invest in people. We've got to, whether it's education, infrastructure, research and development, the types of things that will get our economy moving. The food stamp program, which was, you know, cut dramatically. And I can't let the Republicans off the hook just because they don't show up for this forum. By the Republicans. This is the wrong direction. I think we should look at the low-income tax credit and see if there's some room that we could use to help. Immigration reform. You know, so many people would be able to be so much more productive and earn better income if we dealt with immigration reform. The minimum wage. I mean, people who work full-time and are still living in poverty because we have not raised the minimum wage in whatever number of years it is, $7.25. Currently, $10.10 is what we should be at, and it's been proposed. Republicans are blocking it. So there's a lot we can do. We just need to send the right people to Washington and get the country moving again.
I'm going to go to one of these, and then we're going to go back to that. We're going to get it all done because things are moving pretty well here. Question is, where do you rank global warming among the many problems we face today? Ms. Blais.
Well, some people think the Green Party is only about that. And of course it is a major issue, and some of Green Party members think it is the biggest issue humanity faces. But actually, if you look at the platform, we cover so many issues, social justice and other things. But indeed, it is a huge issue. So that's why we want to have people working on the environment, and King Kong should not exist. We need to get rid of the King Kong. Okay, it's oil and nuclear and gas, and the K is anyway, I'm going to get that right. But Coal, thank you. It's a C. I was looking for coal. Yes, coal. And so we need to get into, well, we want to educate our population so we can go green. And we want, and just that is where we want to go, totally green.
Thank you. Mr. Redpath.
In my opinion, the global warming problem is way down the list in terms of problems that we face. The best way to fight global warming, first of all, there has been no net temperature increase around the globe the last 18 years. No net temperature increase. Sometimes some of the statistics are being distorted a little bit, or not the full story is being told. I mean, recently there was a declaration that, oh, August 2014 was the warmest August ever in this planet, but what they didn't say was that wasn't the warmest month ever. The warmest month ever was about 200 months ago, back in February 1998, I believe. So what the best way to address global warming is to have an affluent society. An affluent society is going to be able to adapt to warming, and I'm not saying that that overall that there's not any global warming, but it does not strike me as a very big problem, and there's nothing we can really do. There were certain plans put forth recently by President Obama that if it gone through, it would have lowered the temperature increase by 0.02 degrees Celsius by the year 2100 on average. There's nothing too much we can do without the involvement of China and India in this, but in terms of the problems we are facing, I think it's well down the list.
And Mr. Foust.
I believe that climate change is the most significant environmental challenge we face, not only in our country, but around the world. I mean, we already see it with more severe droughts, more severe weather, sea level is rising. You know, I respect everyone's opinion on this issue, but I'm going to go with the 99.5% of scientists who study this and tell us that, hey, we've got a problem. And it's up to us to start dealing with it, or we're going to leave this problem for future generations, and it's going to be much more severe when they have to deal with it. What we should be doing now, in my opinion, is trying to move away from the carbon-based pollutants, the energies of coal, oil, natural gas. We can't do it overnight. We can't disrupt our economy. We can't cause people's utility bills to go through the roof by just shutting them down. We can't do that. But we have to start making some significant strides to working toward getting alternative fuels. We can do that. We need to work harder at energy efficiency, energy conservation, and we need to be the leader. Let's face it, the United States, whether we like it or not, we are the leader in most things. People look to us. So, you know, to say we're going to wait for Russia or China or someone else to take the lead, that's not us. We need to take the lead. We need to develop the technologies that will create great jobs here in America, and those other countries will have to deal with climate change at some point. Let them be buying our technologies rather than us let them go first, and we'll be buying theirs. So I think it's a huge challenge. It's a tremendous opportunity in terms of being able to get our economy back on track by creating whole new industries.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. All right, we have a microphone right here, right to your left, to your left.
I moved. I need you to come this way.
That's right.
Good afternoon. My question is concerning the VRAA. Mr. Foust, you did a very good job of letting us know whether or not you was for it or not, and you gave us your reasoning why. However, Mr. Redpath and Ms. Blais, I need a clarity as to whether or not you are or not for the VRAA. If so, your reasoning why.
Mr. Redpath?
Voting rights. Ma'am, I don't know enough details to speak to it. All I'm saying is that we should have there should be a right to vote in the U.S. Constitution. and there should be an election system with integrity. But I am going to say that the world we have today is much advanced from the world that existed 50 years ago. And I can understand why the Voting Rights Act was passed back at that time. Does the Justice Department now need to review redistricting in Virginia? I don't think so. I don't think there's a need. The Virginia I see, that I've lived here for 29 years, do I think that there is such malice within the, I mean, beyond the usual gerrymandering, which we ought to do away with multi-member districts. But no, I don't know the details of the act, so I'm not quite sure how to respond. But do I think that we live in a Virginia that needs to have its state legislative decisions on voting matters reviewed by the General Assembly's decisions reviewed by the Department of Justice? No, I don't think so.
Of course, Ms. Blais.
Well, it took a lot. Every time there was redistricting, it had to go to the Departments of Justice for Section 5 for preclearance, and it took a lot of extra time in the whole process. So there were some negatives to it. It wasn't just positives, but so I can see why we had it, and it's questionable to me how necessary it is now.
I assume that based on your question that you had a satisfactory answer from her, or you like to, okay. All right, very good. You need another moment on technology, or are we doing okay, Jim? Okay, great. 5 more minutes, great. Okay, let's go to a prearranged one. Do you support increased accessibility to birth control over the counter for adult women? Mr. Foust?
I would say that depends. It depends on whether, right now, the ACA has done a wonderful job of making women's contraceptive covered by insurance plans. There are a lot of people who don't want that type of access through the ACA. They're suggesting that we do birth control over the counter, which in all probability means that it is no longer covered by insurance, which further means that low-income women and young, older girls will not have access to birth control because they can no longer afford it, and that concerns me deeply. So if we can go in and amend, say the ACA, which has been utterly impossible to do, to even fix the obvious problems because the Republicans don't want to give President Obama a victory on ACA. If we could get them to come together and work on a common sense solution, I think having easier access would probably be a positive thing. But having no access because you cannot afford it and your insurance company is no longer obligated to pay for it is not a good thing.
Ms. Blais? Yes, the question is, do you support increased accessibility to birth control over the counter for adult women?
Yes.
Mr. Redpath?
Same answer. Yes.
Yes. I want to make sure it gets recorded, though. Okay. All right. Now we're on this side for a question from the audience, an oral question. Is there one? Yes, ma'am.
Because this is you're all going for federal positions, I said Fairfax County accepts a lot of federal funds, and I said there is I guess the question is, what is your position about oversight into the courthouse, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the police departments in the state, as there is, I guess, unfair trials, there's fabricated police reports, there's citizens actually being jeopardized, and when we actually start to talk about actual, issues of poverty, issues of needing to be fed, I said some of those become, citizens get jeopardized by our courts, by our police department, and that affects housing, it affects joblessness, it affects homelessness, it affects feeding each other. And I guess because Wolf versus Clark was a federal decision about Prince William County Police Department fabricating police reports,
Right.
because it was about the Commonwealth Attorney's Office hiding that information.
Well, I think we have the gist of the question, so let me go get it.
So the question is, do you believe in oversight? Since we accept federal funds in each one of our counties, Prince William, Fairfax, do you,
Right.
what is your position about oversight over Commonwealth Police, the justice, the judicial system?
Thank you.
Redpath. I don't think the federal government should be involved in it, but I think the vast majority of federal grants to state and local governments ought to be done away with. Right now, I mean, a lot of the militarization of our police is due to certain federal grants that exist where the money can only be expended in certain ways, and this has led to greatly increased militarization of police departments around this nation. So that's a Virginia problem, and I'm not, those certainly sound like very legitimate problems, but again, we are looking as a society too much to the federal government to solve our problems, to pay for this, to pay for that. One of the best things that could happen to this nation is some real respect for the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, certain enumerated powers that are stated in the Constitution be the responsibility of the federal government. Everything else then falls to the states or localities or to the people. So I don't think there ought to be federal oversight, but I don't think there ought to be federal grants, except in very rare circumstances in the first place.
Finish this question? Finish this question? Okay, great. Mr. Foust.
The system you described, I mean, the judicial system, the prosecutor, county prosecutor, the police, I mean, they're all three basically independent of each other. The police ultimately report to work for the Board of Supervisors. The judicial is appointed by the legislature, and the voters elect the Commonwealth Attorney. So, you know, I don't think we have a serious problem in Virginia, the way the system is set up, but I do think that it is the responsibility of the federal government to ultimately protect every citizen's constitutional rights if police, judicial, prosecutor are going to violate those rights. So it's infrequent, it's always there, and it gets involved. The federal government will come in and investigate when it becomes a constitutional violation. But on a day-to-day basis, the system we have is pretty good, and I think it's working pretty well.
Thank you. Ms. Blais?
I think I have to agree with that one. I mean, if there are problems, I'd like to hear about them. But and we all know about this increased militarization, which we don't want. But the police in D.C. now have those cameras on their that they will be wearing. So it's just, I think they're doing that because they want to have things recorded, and they are trying to get when people are brought in, they want things recorded, and so that's an attempt so that for an openness and transparency in our government.
Could you explain your opinion on the role of the federal government in education, about testing, the role of the Department of Education, charter schools, and school vouchers? So I think we'll start with Mr. Redpath.
None. Absolutely none. We've spent so much money on the Department of Education since the time of its founding in the late 1970s. Test scores haven't improved. We are sinking in international comparisons. I just do not see where the Federal Department of Education has helped matters in the United States. I think that it is a matter, it's not an enumerated power in the federal Constitution. We should have states involved in this. Frankly, I think states, if I were running for House of Delegates or state Senate or governor, I would say that I would want a universal education tax credit program for K through 12. I think greater school choice Greater competition will stimulate better education outcomes in this nation. But I think that the money, near as I can tell, there's been little to no return from the Federal Department of Education. As a matter of fact, I would abolish the Federal Department of Education. I think there ought to be no role, I see no role for the federal government in education. States can handle this cooperatively with each other, private organizations, things of that nature.
Thank you. Ms. Blais?
Well, I think there's a common core of learning that people should learn, and that to see and for government to oversee it is not a bad idea. So I believe we need to, our children are our future, so of course we want to educate them the very best way we can.
Very much. Mr. Foust.
Thank you. I do see a role for the federal government in education, and I see it successful every day I go to work. If you've got Title I schools that are being, federal government, because of the inequality of resources and income around the nation, at a federal level, we are a country and a nation, and we're all in this together. There is a way to utilize resources to help those schools that are in pockets of poverty, ways that we in a local government could never afford. Does that work? Yep. And that's not good enough. I mean, we can't have, some people getting ahead and others falling behind if we can avoid it. And we can. We've proven we can through Title I schools. IDEA, the programs to help students with disabilities. These are things that we as a nation have come together, made a priority, and we're working to help solve. I absolutely believe that, running your schools from the local school boards are the best approach. We're testing things here in Fairfax County that someday will be adopted, I'm sure, across the nation as the best practice. They're doing the same thing out in California. It's a great way to function, the way we have the federal government helping us but not leading us. We're doing it at a local level, and we're getting the job done. And we just need to raise the standards, but it's going to be a test across the nation as to who comes up with the right formula to really do that. And we're on the right path, I think.
Thank you very much. All right, back to the audience. Any? Yes. Your microphone is. We're just going to have. Oh, okay.
Thank you for being here today. My question is, under what circumstances would you authorize the use of military force? Or another way of looking at it, what current situations in the world today do you think are in our national interest?
Mr. Foust.
Well, I absolutely believe that Congress should have a role in making that decision, and I'm very disappointed that not just the current president, but recent presidents have done everything they can to exclude Congress from the decision-making process. I'm equally disappointed in Congress because they have, in my opinion, tried to avoid their responsibility because they're afraid to take that responsibility. They've placed it on the president and said, go ahead and do something, and I'll talk about it on Sunday when I get on national TV, and I'll tell you how you did it wrong. It's just wrong the way our national defense is being handled right now. I believe the president has come up with the right approach to the, ISIS or ISIL. He's utilizing first of all, I think they represent a national security risk for America in the long run. So he's using our resources, air power, but he's relying on allies in the process, which I think you have to do. You can't go into these regions as the Americans are going to go in and solve the region's problems. They've got to be solved regionally, but to the extent it's in our national interest, we can be at the table and help them, and we're doing that. So I think, I think your national interest or a very significant humanitarian crisis, you turn to utilizing force to help solve it. And I think this president has, it's clear he doesn't want a perpetual state of war. But it's also clear he sees a problem and he's willing to, leave his goal of bringing peace to the world and deal with that problem. I respect him for that.
Mr. Redpath.
I certainly agree with Mr. Foust's initial comments. I think that it's horrible the way that the Founding Fathers wanted war to be a committee decision. I mean, that's why they put the war power with the Congress. And I think that the President ought to defer to the Congress on matters where it doesn't involve defense from an attack. I think that's really the only, to defend against an attack, I think obviously you can't wait for Congress to vote on that. But everything else, I think that you can. So unless there's an extremely urgent matter with respect to what I would call a matter around the world that calls for the U.S. military to be involved, right now I would say none. I have yet to hear a coherent, well laid out argument how ISIS is a threat to the United States. Even some government agencies have said that it's not right now. So I would say that if there is a threat, a proximate threat or an attack on the United States or its territories affecting the people and property in the United States, it's okay for the president to respond unilaterally, otherwise has to go to Congress. If I were in Congress right now, I would not vote for any authorization of use of military force around the world based on my knowledge as I stand here right now.
Ms. Blais.
Everything Bill Redpath said, I agree with totally. As a Green, we are so against the militarization, the corporate militarization in this world. It's one of the major reasons I'm running. I think to have over half of our budget spent on defense supposedly, but it's actually warfare. It's horrible. We have bases all over this world. I just keep thinking, how would we respond if other countries had bases on our property? So this is a major point. We should not be having these drones, these killer drones all over in different countries. Who are we? We should not be this kind of person, and it generates so much hatred and towards us, and I think rightfully so. We just really need to decrease our military involvement, and I would be, so there.
Thank you. Other questions on this side? Yes. Mike is coming.
Mr. Redpath, you have brought up, is this working?
Yeah. Yep.
You brought up the 10th Amendment, and I think your views on the 10th Amendment and its effect on the whole Constitution are very similar to conservative and Republican views. Whereas, Mr. Foust, you have a different view of the Constitution. The Constitution is something we're going to be discussing a lot in the many years to come, I think. So it's really at the heart of the whole issue going on here. How do you see the 10th Amendment negating portions of the Constitution? Negating. In other words, I don't see the 10th Amendment negating or voiding the tax and spending clause, but you seem to think it does.
All right,
and I would like to see Mr. Foust defend his position on the broader definition of the Constitution, the implied powers of Washington and Hamilton.
All right. Let us wait for this announcement. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Redpath, you go first.
No, I maybe you misunderstood. I certainly think that there is legitimate spending by the federal government, and that money has to be raised some way. All I'm saying is that when possible, government should be brought down to the lowest level possible. So, I'm not going to defend the general welfare. To say that that now opens up the federal government to be involved in everything, no, I don't agree. I think there are enumerated powers in the Constitution. I do not think the general welfare clause then opens up the Constitution or the federal government to be involved in anything it wants to. Sir, you were already advised to let me answer the question, okay? So I'm answering it. In fact, I have answered it.
And there's also a First Amendment which we'd like to follow here too. So, Mr. Foust?
No, I think you have to always look at what the federal government is trying to get or is participating in. But you do have the General Welfare Clause, you have the Commerce Clause, you have the Supreme Court says there's a privacy rights in the Constitution you have to balance against. So, it's an issue that I guess you have to look at the facts. That's what they always say. Look at the facts and apply the law. But the federal government, in my opinion, is not in areas that it shouldn't be in constitutionally, or there would be the pushback of the lawsuits and the litigation, and we'd be getting, we would be removing the federal government from those areas. They tried it with the ACA. One of the most conservative members of Virginia, or of the Supreme Court, agreed that it was constitutionally acceptable for the federal government to adopt the ACA. So, but there were differences of opinion before that decision was made. So it'll depend on the facts, but in my opinion, to the extent the federal government steps over the line, it will get challenged, and the Supreme Court's there to make the ultimate call.
Ms. Blais, any comments? Okay. All right. I see. Okay, go ahead. The eagerness was convincing.
Well, we're getting near to the end. The most important, having been a candidate myself.
I'll do this with the mic.
Sure.
Thanks.
Having been up there myself, I think the important question before this ends to ask each of the candidates, what are their top 3 legislative priorities that if they were elected, what legislation would they actively push through the House?
Thank you.
Top 3.
Top 3.
Thank you.
Ms. Blais?
Decrease in the defense budget. This election, this winner-take-all election is a major problem, and it has so many things involved in it with the gerrymandering and things like that. So election reform would be up there, I think, and then as a Green, I guess I should say the climate. But as an independent Green, I would say more trains, less traffic, which again is the climate issue, basically.
Mr. Foust?
That's an excellent question. And it's kind of different from asking us what our top 3 priorities are for running. You're asking us what our first 3 legislative initiatives would be. I think there are things set up that could easily pass. Immigration reform is an example. The Senate came together, compromise basis, no one got everything they wanted, but they come up with a bill that would really solve a significant problem. It's languishing in the House. I would like to see that passed. Fair Pay Act. You've got, again, a situation where you got good legislation, but for hyper-partisan, in my opinion, political reasons, it's being blocked. And then on climate change, I think I would like to see, if it's not out there now, initiate something quickly to get us moving toward incentives for alternative fuels.
Before I go to Mr. Redpath, for those of you who are looking at your watch saying, hey, it's 4 o'clock, we start a little late, so we're going to go a little bit late, so 4:30. Oh, I was told 4 o'clock. Oh, my apologies. I'm trying to be ahead of myself. Okay, Mr. Redpath.
I know that. Right, okay. I think the most important issue facing us right now is the coming entitlement crisis. I think that's the thing that really needs to be addressed by the Congress. It is my understanding, based on what I've read, by 2025, that's just 11 years in the future, the revenues of the federal government will cover Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, federal portion, and the interest on the debt, and then everything else will have to be borrowed, just 11 years in the future. And so I think that's the most important issue facing the Congress. What are we going to do about Social Security? What are we going to do about Medicare and Medicaid? I've said for years, the federal government is going to welch on its promises to the American people. It is inevitable, not because it wants to, but because it will have to. And there are going to be changes coming. The sooner that is addressed, whether it's the Cato Institute 6.2% plan, whether it's premium support, changing Medicare to make it a premium support program to get people to incentivize seniors to be better purchasers of insurance and medical services. With Medicaid, my plan is basically to turn it into a block grant. Currently now, if a state spends money, the federal government spends money, there's an incentive for states to get the federal government to spend more and more and more on Medicaid. The costs are mushrooming. Everybody uses the word unsustainable to describe the entitlement situation, but there really isn't any substantive or very little substantive progress in dealing with these ideas. I would also repeal Obamacare, work to deregulate health care. I would institute a flat tax, and I would cut discretionary spending. I would eliminate the Departments of Education, Energy, and HUD. I would end all corporate welfare. I would end all farm subsidies.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to a card, then I'll go back to you. We have time. Yesterday's Washington Post ran an article about Virginia's new voter ID law, reporting that 200,000 Virginians lack the proper identification to vote. Do you support the new voter ID laws, and what should Congress do about them as they are springing up nationwide? Ms. Blais?
This is a major effort of many people to keep some other people from the polling place. And actually, I thought it was more than 200,000. I thought it was 400,000. Oh, did they revise it? Well, anyway, it's way too many. And and all along we've been hearing, we've been hearing for so long that there really wasn't a huge problem ever to begin with. It's a felony. I don't want to commit a felony. I don't think most people do. And it has not been a problem. And we're fixing something that's a terrible waste of effort and time. So,
thank you very much. Mr. Redpath.
There has to be integrity in our election system, so I would tend to favor voter ID laws. But the government has to make it easy for people to get IDs if they don't have voter IDs. Call them up, we'll come out and take your picture, we'll produce your ID right there. All the DMVs, all the libraries, everywhere. I think that it has to be, if we're going to have a photo ID requirement, and it may be, I don't know whether it's necessary, but it may be necessary. You know, I hear, well, there haven't been problems in the past. I bet not long before 9/11, somebody said, we don't need stronger cockpit doors. So you have to judge problems in the future, not what has happened in the past. So we have to have integrity with elections generally. So I favor voter ID laws, but it has to be very easy for people to get voter IDs, or we shouldn't have such laws.
Thank you. Mr. Foust?
Kind of spoke to this in a previous answer, but basically we should be making it easier for people to vote. We do not have a significant voter fraud issue. We are going to have a significant voter turnout issue. Everything we do is making us less and less reflective of what we as a community want, whether it's limiting people to vote to just a certain select group that we know we're going to have access to the IDs, and make sure we design the law so that other groups we know probably won't. I mean, that's wrong. yeah, it's redistricting. You look at what's happening with redistricting. We're getting to the point where you know, we're not as democratic as we need to be. We need to get back to the point where every person's vote counts. Every person's vote counts equally. Every person has equal access to voting, and you know, we're moving in the opposite direction. So I say stop. Let's fix this. Let's go toward more absentee early voting. Let's go make it easier to identify yourself without having to go to a process of having the government come to your house and take your picture, or you go as an elderly person who hasn't had a picture ID in years, go to someplace to get your picture taken just to vote. Let's make it easier, and let's stop this silliness of trying to make sure that people who we don't think are going to vote the way we want them to vote don't have access to the vote. It's not right.
Thank you. I saw a hand up. Yes.
Right here.
Yes, thank you.
You touched on Medicaid expansion a couple of minutes ago, Mr. Redpath. I wanted to give the other candidates an opportunity to tell us what they think about Medicaid expansion.
Okay. Mr. Foust?
I support Medicaid expansion. I am almost beside myself with the fact, I can't believe that we're even having a debate at this point. It's so obvious to me that if we could insure 400,000 Virginians, who are hardworking Virginians who are caught in that daggone gap between, you know, the existing Medicaid and the exchanges, who are able to get insurance through the exchanges, if we can insure them, if we can add 20 to 30,000 new jobs to our economy, which is what Medicaid expansion would do. If we could bring $2 billion of tax money that we're currently spending and sending to Washington, and they're sending all over the country to pay for Medicaid expansion in other states, if we could bring that back to Virginia, you know, every issue has two sides, but this one, to me, couldn't be more obvious. We should expand Medicaid. We should have Medicaid expansion in Virginia. You know, the empty chair candidate, Barbara Comstock, brags about voting against Medicaid expansion. I would be ashamed of myself if I voted against Medicaid expansion. It's the wrong thing to do on so many different levels, and we need to get it in Virginia. And you know, I hope with the right, and we got elections coming up every year in Virginia. We're going to get it because people are going to rise up and say, this is ridiculous. Your hyper-partisanship, your refusal to do it because you don't want to let President Obama's ACA appear to have a success is unacceptable. You got to do it for the people.
Ms. Blais.
I totally agree with that. But as a Green Party member also, we believe that is, again, these are all like little bits of the whole picture, and it's too little to be, I mean, we need single-payer health care for all, so that would cover it. But I totally agree. We should have, it was a shame it wasn't passed.
Mr. Redpath, you were a reference. Is there anything else you want to say on the subject?
Yeah. We're going broke, folks. This nation is going broke. Even, you don't see it right now, but at some point, something's going to give. There's a late economist named Rudiger Dornbusch who said that financial crises take longer to develop than you think they will, but when they happen faster than you think they will. And I don't know what it's going to take. Unfortunately, I'm coming to the point where I'm fearful that the only thing that's going to change things in this nation is that we're going to have some sort of major debt or financial crisis. Probably won't be this decade, probably in the 20s or 30s. But we have to get government spending under control. There are going to be some tough decisions to be made, because if we don't, and if we do face a major debt crisis at some point down the road, we're all going to be poor. So it's all I'm saying is we can't have everything and there are tough decisions to be made here for the benefit of society as a whole.
Thank you. Now, even though I was momentarily time challenged before, we're at a point where we're going to offer this as the last question, so that there is an opportunity for those of you who have come today to have an opportunity to interact one-on-one with the candidates who have been responding to your questions. And the last question is a very appropriate last question, which is, what makes you qualified to hold a seat in Congress? Ms. Blais.
Okay, I feel I have a lot of world experience. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I have had over 100 foster children, and I have been a volunteer for basically ever since when I had my third child born. I stopped working outside the house, and I had a job for almost 20 years working inside my house from home. So I have that business experience. I was vice president of a company. I graduated at 19 with a degree in economics, and I have pursued ever since then trying to do the best I can in all fields of endeavor. And I am constantly trying to learn. I go to George Mason. I go to all sorts of events and conventions, and I've been active in many different organizations. So, so for that perspective, I think I would have something new and different, perhaps, to offer.
Thank you for that. Mr. Redpath.
I believe in limited government. I think it's best. I believe in both economic freedom and individual freedom. We don't talk much in this setting about personal freedoms, but believe me, the Libertarian Party is a leader in the fight for personal freedoms in this nation. We want to end the war on drugs. We basically think that people should be able to live their lives as they choose without interference, as long as they aren't harming other people or their property. And that is something that is lacking in both the Republican and Democratic parties. That's why we're in the mess we're in right now. We've had an activist government in this nation for too long that can't say no. We need more people on Capitol Hill who can say no. I'm a financial person. As I said earlier, I'm a CPA and I'm a CFA. But I harbor no illusions. I'm not delusional. I know I'm very much a long shot to win this election. I'm running to advance the cause of the Libertarian Party because I am totally fed up with the two major parties in this nation. I want there to be more choice at the ballot box for people. I want there to be proportional representation so that there can be new voices and real choices at the ballot box and in the legislature going forward. That's why I'm running. But if I were elected, I would certainly remain faithful to what I have said. I would not change with the wins on Capitol Hill, and I would work to advance both economic freedom and personal freedoms in this nation unceasingly for 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Foust.
Thank you. I believe I'm qualified based on several things. One, my values, my experience, and my position on the issues that we need to address as a nation. My values were formed in, as a kid, I grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, working class family. First member of my family to go to college. Paid for it by working in steel mills on the railroad because my dad was busy putting food on the table for 7 people as a laborer on the railroad. So I learned the value of a good education and hard work. I learned the importance, of having the opportunity to live the American dream, and I think we need that. We need to get back to those values. My experience, I've served on the Fairfax County Board for 7 years. I have a reputation as being a problem solver, as being someone who can work across the aisle, work with anybody to get the job done, move the country forward, or move the county forward, and I want to take that to Washington to move the country forward. On the issues, clearly, if you look at this country, what's missing is we no longer have the spirit that we once had of cooperation in Washington, of being willing to accept 70% of what you want, but rather insisting all the time on 100 and thereby getting zero. You know, we need to come together in Washington. We need to compromise. We need to stop pointing fingers on a partisan basis. We need to focus on getting the economy moving again. We need to, you know, there's nothing we can do as a nation that is more important than investing and improving our educational system, whether it's early childhood, K through 12, or college. We're entering a 21st century economy, and we need that well-educated workforce. So on a woman's right to make her own health care decisions, I'm not sure what positions are of everyone here, but I'll tell you, my Republican opponent would take away a woman's right to make her own health care choices. That's unacceptable. That is one reason I will fight hard in Congress against people like her. Thank you.
Thank you very much.